A Lilith Thanksgiving melts my heart because I love Lilith. I love seeing Frasier and Lilith together. And I always love the holiday-themed episodes of sitcoms as well, at least in most cases. This is the 7th episode of the 4th season of Frasier. This is directed by Jeff Melman, and as always there will be spoilers from now. As I go through the episode, I'll go through things chronologically and share some thoughts, so there'll be spoilers from now, but I can sum up first of all by saying I loved it. It starts off in Frasier's apartment. Everybody is getting ready to go to Thanksgiving. Roz is actually house-sitting because Daphne has plans of her own, and that was a nice way to include Roz because Roz is in pretty much every episode, and after this we're actually at Lilith's house. And that also means we're in Boston, which I'm very excited about. We don't actually get to see anything of Boston, but it's nice to be close to Cheers. And they're actually going there because Frederick has passed the Marbury Academy qualifying exam. And the only time the headmaster has the time to see Lilith and Frasier for an interview is on Thanksgiving morning. So they go over there and we cut to Freddie greeting Martin and Niles, and then he runs out to see Frasier, and Lilith tells Niles to help with the turkey because she hasn't got a lot of time, and he makes a joke about her defrosting, and then she tells him, might I suggest you stuff it, which I absolutely love. I adore Lilith so much. And then Frasier comes in carrying Freddie, and it's beautiful, but it's heartbreaking because I'm sure Frasier would love to spend more time with his son. And obviously one of the things about Frasier moving to Seattle, of course, is that he moved away from Freddie, which is a tremendous shame. We then get to Dr. Campbell's house. He's played by Paxton Whitehead. And what's interesting about this is Lilith seems nervous. And I'm not saying Lilith has never been nervous before. She certainly has. In episodes of Cheers, there were times when she was quite apprehensive. But it's unusual. It's not what we think of when we think of Lilith. So it's always interesting to see her letting her guard down and showing her emotions a little bit more. And before we get any further with that, we cut to Freddie, who has a bruised eye because he was playing ball with Martin, and he has the sports skills, at least the baseball skills, of Niles and Frasier. Niles then opens the fridge door on Freddie's face, and it's absolutely chaotic. Frasier and Lilith return very briefly, and they think things went well, but they worried that they didn't make it clear enough that this school was the one that was their priority. So they decide to go back, pretending that Lilith had dropped an earring. And this is what they do, and they go back, and there's this beautiful scene, I think it might be the thumbnail for this beautiful moment where they're standing in the doorway side by side, and we have the autumnal colours of the leaves behind them, and it's so beautiful. And needless to say, Dr. Campbell's not exactly delighted that they're there. Lilith says that they really should look for the earring rather than letting him call them if he finds it, because it was a present from Golda Meir. And they go in, Lilith pretends to look for the earring, and she pretends to find it, and just as they're leaving, they say their spiel about how much this school is the one for Frederick, and then Dr. Campbell asks them how Lilith met Golda Meir, and Frasier makes a joke about Oscar Meyer, which I think probably wouldn't have meant anything to me the first time I watched this episode, but for some reason, maybe I googled it the last time I watched this episode, because I knew that Oscar Meyer is a brand of hot dogs. I don't know if they do other meat products, but they do hot dogs, and I knew that, but I think that's because I must have googled it the last time, because it didn't mean anything to me, being British as I am. And Lilith says, I loved Lilith in this moment, she says, it's a funny story. Frasier, you tell it much better than I do. Absolutely pushing Frasier into it. And yeah, Frasier comes up with this story about how Lilith was dating Oscar Meyer, which is just brilliant. And they then are about to leave, and Dr. Campbell says, Marbury thanks you for your interest, which they know means not a chance, goodbye. They go back very quickly, and Frederick looks very worse for wear, but they don't really pay any attention. They then end up going back to Dr. Campbell's house because they believe that actually he'd been fishing for a donation, because he had said a few things about people donating a lot of money. So they go over, they give him the check, and Dr. Campbell says he had never accepted a bribe and he was insulted and kind of suggested that the amount on the check wasn't exactly very much anyway. So Lilith and Frasier go back home. We actually see Niles prepping the turkey and he leaves the room. Lilith and Frasier come in, grab the turkey out of the oven, walk back out again, and then Niles comes into the kitchen and looks in the oven and the turkey has just magically disappeared as far as he can see. And Frasier and Lilith take the turkey to Dr. Campbell's, and this is because with all of the interruptions, his turkey isn't ready for his guests. And I admire them to an extent because they enter the home and they actually speak to Dr. Campbell's guests and they admit that they brought the turkey kind of as a peace offering because they'd kind of been a little bit over-enthusiastic about things. And then an argument ensues between the guests who are bickering about which school is best or which schools are not as good. And Dr. Campbell comes into the room and he realises the only way that he will never see Frasier and Lilith again is if Frederick gets admitted into the school. And that's what he does. And this is with the caveat that Frasier and Lilith are not allowed to attend any school events at all. And they leave, shut the door, and they say in unison, "We're in," which is so lovely because there is, whenever Lilith's mentioned in Frasier, there's a lot of animosity, there's a lot of bitterness, there are a lot of jokes at Lilith's expense, but I do think they make a good pairing. And I love watching them together. I love watching them in Cheers. Granted, I loved watching Diane and Frasier as well, although I am Team Sam and Diane. But I do love Frasier and Lilith together, so when we see them having little shared moments like this, it makes me rather happy. And I think, above all else, they are a good parenting team, which I guess is the most important thing. And then we have the final scene where Dr. Campbell sees the loose thread on the chair that's been in his family for generations, and this is the chair that Frasier was sitting on at the beginning, where he kind of accidentally pulled a thread loose and the little birdie had no beak anymore. A pretty decent way to end things. I would have preferred that final scene had something to do with Frederick and his many injuries. I don't know what that scene could have been, but for me, that would have been a better way to round off the episode, focusing on Freddie and Martin and Niles. But I didn't mind the ending, and ultimately it's a good episode. Holiday-themed episodes are generally always great, and I love Lilith so much, and just getting Frasier back to Boston and getting that little bit closer to Cheers makes me really happy, and I love Lilith so much. So, needless to say, I'm rather pleased. A Lilith Thanksgiving is brilliant. It had the potential to be repetitive, but I feel like there was enough comedy in there, and there was enough variety in each of the visits that it helped to keep it fresh. For example, there's an episode of Cheers in season 5 where there's a renowned psychiatrist, and I don't want to go into too much detail in case you haven't seen it, but he says that Diane and Sam shouldn't marry, and Diane doesn't want to hear this, so she keeps going back to his hotel room to get him to change his answer, to say that Diane and Sam should marry, and she goes back maybe 3 or 4 times. And it's stale. I love Cheers with all my heart. I love Cheers more than I love Frasier. But that episode became so repetitive. But here we have an example of something, it's a different narrative, but a similar trope of returning again and again to the same scene and trying to do different things to achieve the same end goal. But it's done in a way that's entertaining and engaging, and I rather liked it a lot. So, very impressed there. Needless to say, A Lilith Thanksgiving is an episode that I'm very, very happy with.